and welcome to Leaders in Conversation with me, Anni Townend, podcast host and partner to executives, leaders and their teams, co-founder of Collaboration Equation and of the podcast Finding Your Collaborative Edge with Lucy Kidd. Leaders in Conversation is the podcast in which leaders weave together the threads of their life and leadership stories, the people, places and experiences that have shaped them, their values, their beliefs, passion and purpose, all to encourage and inspire you to be even more confident and courageous in your leadership. If you're not already, please do subscribe to the podcast, review and share it. Thank you. Today's guest is Mark Burden, and the title of our conversation is From Inside the Kitchen to Inside Government. I had the joy of meeting Mark on a leadership development programme. Mark shared with me that he enjoyed listening to my podcast, and his colleague suggested that he would make a great guest with a powerful story to tell. So it is a great joy, not least as he was a bit reluctant at first to be in conversation with me, but to also hear his story. In our conversation, Mark offers valuable insights into how presenteeism is not about visibility, the importance of seeking feedback, disability and the art of the possible, and finally, how everyone is integral to achieving the thing. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, Annie. Absolutely delighted to be here. Really looking forward to our conversation today.
I'm really delighted you did say yes, because you were very nervous, and you're not the only person who, when I invite them to be a guest on Leaders in Conversation with me, they look at the guest list and they will come up with a host of reasons why maybe they don't belong on that list. And one of the things that I always say is, everybody is welcome. We all have a story to tell. And I'm intrigued by the title that you've chosen for our conversation today, that you were once a chef inside the kitchen and that I met you. Now you're inside government. So let's make a start and hear something of your journey and start with the people and the places and the key experiences that have shaped you and made you who you are today, starting in your childhood.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Annie. In terms of the people, it will have to be my parents, both of which were hardworking. Unfortunately, I had lots of health challenges and still do as a grown adult. Always reflecting back now as a father to two young girls, what my parents probably went through in terms of not just juggling jobs, but juggling a household, juggling everything around the requirements of being a parent, but also looking after me, hospital stays and visits, and also looking after their parents who were quite elderly at the time. I really do admire them. Probably don't say it enough, actually, but I really do admire the journey that they went through. Now being a father myself, and the worries and the woes and the challenges that all brings. And I think within that, probably my grandparents.
Let's talk about your grandma, because there is often somebody in our lives, in our childhood, be that a teacher, a friend of a parent, or somebody who took care of us and inspired us to play, to have fun, to discover our joy.
She used to make bread every 2 days. My granddad was adamant he would not eat the shop-bought rubbish, as he would call it at the time. So I learned from quite an early age the science behind it. I didn't recognise it as science at the time. I recognised a big bowl and lots of stuff being thrown in. But the importance that sort of set when I've reflected back in terms of my leadership journey. So it's about having everything together, and it doesn't always go really well together. It's how you make it work. For example, you put your yeast in, but then don't put the sugar near the yeast because it will overfeed it. Don't put the salt near the yeast because it will kill it. And it's a little bit like leadership, how you have a group of people, of individuals as leaders, and how you make that work. What are the tools and techniques to bring things together in the most constructive way? And that's my recollection really from a young age, and putting it in front of the fire, watching it develop, watching it prove, knocking it back down again, a little bit like leadership to some extent, and then building it back up.
Leadership, I think, is very much about growth and helping each other grow and develop as leaders, not simply grow. But what does it mean to be a leader? Your grandma was leading the way for you in the kitchen, but it's a long way from making bread with your grandma to choosing to go into the kitchen. Tell me, did you always know that's what you wanted to become, a chef?
Absolutely. From a really young age, I loved food. I loved eating food, but I loved preparing food and seeing the joy. And again, huge thank you to my parents for probably smiling and grinning through some terrible things I created. You get the option later on in your school life to choose a subject, and I chose cooking. I remember being the only boy in the class, and I'm really pleased to say the world has evolved massively now. So quite an isolating place, but also I loved it. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot from my cooking teachers at the time, and they helped put some structure and method and principle behind the things that I was doing, not just the ingredients coming together. So they helped with some of the science. And then really fortunate to have a work experience placement while still at school in a kitchen, and helped with the pots. Started in that phase and how important that was. Didn't realise at the time. But then beyond that, they said, oh, would you like to have a go in the pastry section? And that was always my dream, to be a pastry chef. And I think it was filling profiteroles with cream, hundreds. And I remember just loving it. And everyone was quite shocked that someone had just turned up and quite happily do this for hours. And it's rolled from there, really. But absolutely knew very early on.
That's amazing, that repetition that gave you immense pleasure and, I'm imagining, pride. What was it?
I think it's a sense of seeing something at the end of something. Leadership's challenging. Often you will see things, but they're never instantaneous. In that moment in cooking and in future times in other kitchens, you can see in front of you the work that has gone in to produce something. And you don't see the customer's reaction, which is something you almost long for when you work in a kitchen. But you see what has gone in and the effort that has gone into something. I think that gave me huge satisfaction.
And certainly one of our themes for today is feedback. And what did you learn about feedback and the importance of feedback from being in the kitchen? And in particular, when feedback is well given versus feedback when it's not so well given?
Yeah, the kitchen bit first, absolutely. I've worked for various people as a young age. I had one who would talk me through. He would explain where it could be improved. He would explain what I had done well. And he'd explain how to tweak this and maybe make it a little bit more innovative or make things a little bit different next time. The polar opposite of that, Annie, and this has really helped me, I think, in leadership, is when that feedback is, that's not good enough, do it again. That helps nobody. But having received that feedback with little or no support or encouragement or engagement, it's really challenging to then go away and do it better, because what does better look like for them as an individual? You learn to adjust, you adjust your style to work with those, but that is not where I thrived as an individual. I thrived when someone could say, actually, I will spend a few extra minutes sharing my wisdom and my knowledge for you to then go away and take that away. But don't get me wrong, if I was to ask the same question 2 or 3 times, that irritation would grow. Thankfully, I don't think I did that too much. But yeah, the difference in delivery is key.
There are a couple of things there that occur to me. One is that the person who gave you feedback that motivated and encouraged you to do better started with what was good, what you'd done well, and then suggested some tweaks which would help you to be more innovative, more creative, and do it better. And that worked for you. That may or may not work for somebody else, but typically feedback that is encouraging motivates us to have another go and do better. And I think we talk about the feedback sandwich, don't we? Where we start with what was good, but making that very specific, I think, is really important. So we learn what good really looks like, and then where we might tweak, make some changes, and then top and tail the sandwich with that kind of encouraging feedback that we learn from. You are hungry for feedback and hungry to learn, which of course makes you the perfect kind of person to receive feedback. One thing is giving feedback, but the other side of that is receiving the feedback, and your desire to learn and to learn fast makes that easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And receiving feedback is almost more important for me. And I think that's the place to start. Ideas, innovation, things that you've done well, builds that trust, builds that relationship for you to then offer that feedback, whether that's to people that you lead, your peers, people you work with, or outside organizations. Building that trust and allowing them in to offer their view and their reflection on that experience is really powerful to then build that relationship for you as an individual. And I've done that myself in the way that I've led teams. A classic thing for me, to be honest, Annie, is with a group of my SLT, as a collective, to scribe down 3 things you feel I've done well over the last 6 months, 3 things you feel I need to develop in. So it's a collective group view. They almost challenge each other. Actually, no, I think Mark's quite good at that, but I think he needs to do that. So it shows how people view things differently. And that's been hugely insightful for me, as well as doing that on a one-to-one basis and trying to role model that with my teams and my leaders for them to be confident to do that. But it takes time.
It takes time and trust, trusting each other and giving feedback that is committed to the other person's success. And your SLT, your senior leadership team, want you to do well because you do well for them. Sharing feedback, giving feedback, asking for feedback in a team, in a group is so helpful for the very reason that you've described. When we do that in a group, we appreciate that this one thing I do, some people find it and experience it in a helpful way, and other people, the same thing, find it less helpful or it gets in their way. So feedback says as much about the person giving the feedback, I often think, as it does you who's receiving it. And it tells you, oh, that's how they experience me. And I think you will have heard me say one of the most important questions we as leaders can ask people is, what's your experience of me? And especially that felt experience, the impact. What's the impact I have on you? How do you feel around me? Because that's certainly the thing that we remember is how we felt around that person.
I think that impact that you have on those people, and everyone feels things differently, don't they? Everybody responds differently to you as an individual. I remember and reflect back several years now, and I thought I was quite good at communicating. I thought I was a good communicator. I thought I did this well. I was quite inclusive. But feedback was actually, you just say too much. You just tell us too much. You download too much. So it was really good feedback on the levels of information I share and what do I need to do differently. So I'm constantly evolving from the things that people talk to me about. And as I've said before, offering that on a one-to-one basis is really important. I articulate it probably slightly differently. And what have I done that's annoyed you? Because sometimes that sparks some really good innovative conversations. Actually, you annoyed me last week when you didn't respond to this for a few days, or you didn't give me the answer I wanted. It then allows us to talk through why we reached the situation we reached, the decision we reached. And it, again, creates that trust, creates that investment in each other to drive things forward.
What's key in what you say, Mark, is that you spark a conversation, an open conversation through asking the question, but then crucially, you listen. So that's the other thing, isn't it? When we give and or ask for feedback, we need to listen to it. And again, the power of giving and receiving feedback in a team or a group, and for others in the group and team to hear the variations of experience about you, means that if I've got 7 people and 4 of them are saying pretty much the same thing about what they love and enjoy, and they would like more of it, that's a good message to do more of that behaviour, to bring more of that. Equally, there might be something, like you say, that I do that's annoying to some people, and I need to dial that down or choose when to use that behaviour. So it's all about increasing self-awareness, isn't it? Which I firmly believe is very hard to do on one's own, that we do need each other to be able to support, to challenge and to grow together. A bit like the bread, all these ingredients that go to make this perfect or really delicious loaf of bread. Mark, going back again to your childhood, and something you mentioned, which I didn't know until today, is that you were unwell as a child and that you still have some health challenges. And I know one of the themes that we agreed to touch on today is disability. And I would perhaps put being unwell and being unwell over time as a disability.
Yeah, I had quite a lot of hospitalisation as a child. Spent quite a long period of time in hospital, on occasions 3, 4, 5 months stays. Often many things happening, many investigations. Bizarrely, nil by mouth, but still obsessed with watching cooking programmes, Annie, and a hospital bed as they kindly wheeled me in a telly, because I became a resident pretty much. And I think that's the reason I had to step away from the kitchen. Health got the better of me at that moment in time, and quite severely unwell and quite severely losing weight. And quite happy to say someone who has Crohn's disease, inflammatory disease generally of the bowel, but not always. And that really impacted me and slowed me down. Created huge challenges for me. Going back to my love of food, I didn't eat. I couldn't eat. I didn't want food. So it created some very challenging inner battles for me at that point in time. After numerous sort of medication options, and still take them today, and surgery, I've been able to form a really positive, good career in the civil service. And I am so grateful for that. An admin officer over 20 years ago on a temporary contract, I've seen opportunities and development, and I've seen how, as an organisation, having worked in different departments in the civil service, how we're becoming far more understanding and knowledgeable of disability and what people need, and to create an inclusive working environment. So I'm very fortunate now. And the reason to talk about it is I feel I should, as a senior civil servant. I think it's important to talk about who we are, and people don't always see disability. And I think it's so important to champion that regardless of your upbringing, your health, or any other protected characteristics, you can still be pretty good at stuff.
It's great that you're talking about it today in our conversation, I think, Mark, because especially hidden disabilities that people by that very nature wouldn't necessarily know unless you spoke about. I didn't know that you'd had a Crohn's diagnosis and that you live with that. And that was the reason you had to leave the kitchen, and that you chose to go from inside the kitchen to inside government. You describe it as being a great opportunity, but was that an obvious choice for you, that you wanted to become a civil servant and dedicate your life and work to the civil service?
Absolutely not. In true honesty, Annie, when I first started, the story is I went to go into the job centre to say what opportunities are there at the moment, and I spoke to a really friendly advisor who said, "Oh, we're advertising and we've got interviews tomorrow. Would you like to come for an interview?" I think the requirements at the time were GCSE A to C in maths and English, and I had those. That's all I had really. And that was it. Off I went to an interview and then started on that career journey. I've always been so grateful for the opportunity that it's given us. It's absolutely not a career I would have chosen, but would I change it now? No, absolutely not. The roles I've had, the opportunities I've had, the people I've met, and the experiences within that have been amazing.
And one of the things that you've learned along the way in 20 years of being in the civil service is that presenteeism is not about visibility.
It goes back to feedback. Someone many years ago, not long started in the civil service, had a team on a temporary basis. And they said, you always do our one-to-one conversations in a room opposite each other. You've always got your computer in front of you. You're always typing away. So in my head, I'm thinking, well, I'm constructively typing notes of the meeting here, but to them, I was distracted and not focused. So one of the things I commit to now, and it's a small tip, is about shutting the computer and looking at people and almost sitting next to them and engaging in a conversation. And I know, Annie, you do lots of collaboration and lots of walking and talking, and this probably seems quite straightforward. So being in the moment, showing up and being there, being available to answer questions. Visibility is important because having people there with you is key to see them, but actually being in the moment and investing in them, even if it's for a quick hi in that moment, show you're invested in your interest and you get that back. And I love people asking me questions about things other than my job. I really enjoy the opportunity to talk about things outside of work. It goes back to that trust and building relationships. It's so important in building those teams around you.
And being really present to each other, isn't it? It's something that is so hard and yet so easy, particularly if we get feedback like you did. You thought you were being present, but actually for the person that you were giving the feedback to, they didn't feel that you were.
Yeah, and it's really good to just sit back and reflect. And when I was thinking about today and thinking about all my life lessons, whether that's in the kitchen or the civil service, I've learned so much. And there's been so many people that have given little nuggets of advice. And I do try and share those and impart those. I've worked in places where people haven't really engaged and I know how I felt. So I always make that effort if someone starts in the organisation or starts in the area which I'm working in to make that personal connection. It might just be, hello, congratulations. Hello, how are you? What have you done before? And that, I think, does make a big difference to people. It's those little things. It hasn't got to be astronomical. It's just a little hello makes a big difference.
I think so. And a smile, a hello, a thank you. It is those small things, isn't it? And I think they're the things in our hybrid world, and particularly in team meetings that are online and people going from one online meeting to another online meeting. We need to make time for the hello, the how are you, and to remember that it's not always easy for all of us to immediately speak up and speak out and make a contribution. We do need to have a bit of warming up, maybe a paired conversation in a breakout room. You mentioned there that I'm a big fan of the walk and talk. I am. If I can encourage people to sit side by side without a table, without anything in the way, creating an environment. And if that can be in nature, fantastic. But that's not always possible. If it can be side by side as we were when we met in a large circle, we're having those conversations. We can see everybody. And I seem to remember that was a large circle of people where we met in a very big room. But everybody could be seen. Everybody was visible to each other, but they were also present to each other in the listening, in being seen, in being heard and being understood. I recently was invited to be a guest host on somebody else's podcast, Robert Diggins, on his podcast, Highly Relational. And he talks about the highly relational team. And when I asked him, what is it about and what are you about? He said, basically, I help teams hang out together. And I do think we need more of that, making time to hang out together, even if that be in a team meeting, that we need to build in some chat around having a conversation about the personal. I picked up immediately today that you're a proud dad, and becoming a father to your 2 girls has given you an insight into the experience your parents must have had of you being so very poorly as a small child and throughout your childhood.
I am immensely proud, immensely proud. I don't think I ever realised until holding a child for the first time the amount of pressure that felt, the first hold and the first steps and the first conversation. That's great. I love hearing about their day, and they explain things to me about school and what they learn. And it's amazing. Interestingly enough, by chance, my daughter said to me this morning, I was getting ready, "We're learning about podcasts today, Dad." And I was fascinated. I said, "I'm doing one." "Oh, I'm not really interested about what you're doing, but we're doing it." But it was just great how so early on in school, they talk about these things and talk about innovative things that we do. Both really hard-working little girls who are still little, still lots to learn, but immensely proud of all they've achieved. Shout out to my partner, who is a fab mum to them. Between us, we managed to navigate the groups and the after-school activity. I do think back to my parents and the sacrifices they made, balancing everything up that they needed to do, and hugely proud of them for that.
That's lovely to hear. And I'm thinking about your daughters learning about podcasting at school today, of all days. As you know, part of the way in which I podcast is that I always ask guests, as I will be doing you, to listen to their podcast and to make sure that they're happy with it. So I would love for you to share, when I send the audio ahead of us publishing it, that your daughters get to listen. And I would really welcome their feedback. If they've got some feedback for you and me, let's be having it. And I'm going to put an idea into your head that when they are ready, perhaps next year, you and your 2 daughters could be guests on my podcast, because I would love to have another conversation with you. But also to have them in conversation would be a real treat, and to learn from them as well. Mark, as we come to the close of our conversation, we're coming full circle to the other theme, which is how everyone is integral to achieving the thing, which absolutely takes me right back to your grandma and to the dough and to making the bread. But when we particularly think about this in leadership, how do you create that kind of environment in which everyone is and knows that they are part of the thing?
I think it's about bringing people together. Within the civil service, you'll probably know, Annie, we have lots of grade structures. And within that grade structure, we have lots of tasks and roles. The thing for me that is absolutely imperative and so vital is, without somebody doing something that is potentially right at the beginning of that chain, we will never get the result at the end. And it's a little bit like the kitchen. So if somebody doesn't wash the pots, you're not going to be able to serve the food. It's true in leadership, it's true in government, it's true in any organisation. Everybody has a role to play, and everybody is vital in a giant jigsaw puzzle or a loaf of bread, in making something, or as I call it, the thing, happen. Seeking feedback, as I've said before, and consulting them. Don't just confine them to the task. What else can they bring to that table, to that conversation, to help develop and nurture them for their next career challenge? And I'm always pushing us to try and think innovatively and to do things creatively, to develop our talent for the future. And that's a way that we can do that. But everybody is so important. And I don't always think people recognize that. So I always endeavor to say, if you had not done this, we would never got anywhere near that result. If you had not booked that meeting or arranged that travel or organised this infrastructure, we never would have achieved where we needed to get to. So you are integral and you are important. And I think sitting with different people and listening to what they do.
Wonderful. Mark, what are your 3 key encouragements to listeners, to leaders, to anybody looking to create a team in which they feel that sense of presence, of being present, in which feedback can flourish between people, and in which people can be open about those things that are hidden, be that a disability, an illness, or something else that perhaps we feel unable or unsure whether we can be open about and be visible about?
Good question. Be comfortable in not knowing the answer. So as I have progressed, certainly in the civil service, I probably know less now than when I started. I know less of the detail, but I know the people to glue together. So being comfortable in not always knowing the answer, but having the knowledge to connect people together to solve the problem is really important. The second one, mistakes are great. Not all the time, but learn from them. How did it feel? How do you feel as an individual? And how did it make those people feel around you? So make mistakes, not deliberately, but make them and learn from them. And the last one, which I tend to do quite a bit, but I encourage others, is tell that story. Tell the story and explain why. The thing and the what and the who is actually quite easy. If you explain the why, then everything around that is absolutely quite possible. So yeah, those are my 3, Annie.
They are a great 3 encouragements. Thank you, Mark. And as a result of our conversation today, who and what is the conversation that you're going to have with them?
You know what? I'm going to circle back to your offer, Annie, and I'm going to speak to my daughters later on. I'm going to chat to them and talk to them about my day and share my experiences as the first time recording a podcast. I think that will be absolutely key for me today to make sure that they hear about my day, probably for a few minutes, and then we'll progress to their stories of what they've been up to.
I love that. Enjoy the conversation. And I look forward to getting both of their feedback when they've listened. For people who are listening and would like to get in touch with you, Mark, what's the best way of doing that?
LinkedIn, Annie, so Mark Burden, and it will probably say Deputy Director in HMRC. So happy for people to reach out and make connections that way.
Thank you. And thank you so much for our conversation today and for being such a loyal listener to other conversations on Leaders in Conversation with me. And thank you to you, the listener, to listen to other Leaders in Conversation. Please do go to my website, annitownend.com. A huge thank you to Schmogus Media for the wonderful production, along with Louisa Penny of Penny Writing for the marketing of the podcast. To contact me, do go to LinkedIn, Anni Townend, and do email me on annitownend.com. Subscribe to my newsletter. I look forward to connecting with you. Thank you for listening, and thank you again, Mark.
Thanks, Annie.